Hello and welcome back to Reality Check. I'm Ross Coulthart. Now, is there anything that annoys you more than that constant Carl Sagan refrain, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence? It's the line that's been used by contemporary science so much to try to essentially stop any of the claims being made about anomalous phenomena being taken seriously. Which is why I'm very interested to speak to our next guest today, Jim Segala, Dr. Jim Segala. Jim Segala is a physicist engineer who's spent much of the last few years researching anomalous phenomena, especially around the Uinta Basin in Utah, where the Skinwalker Ranch is located. He's got a PhD in physics and advanced degrees in engineering, and he's been involved in anomalous phenomenon research for quite a number of decades, and he's got connections with many of the top scientists in this field. What I'm fascinated to talk about with Jim today is you hear it all the time. You hear it from so many people in mainstream science that the subject of UAPs should not be taken seriously because there is no science. There's nobody doing creditable scientific work to investigate these alleged phenomena. But in fact, Dr. Segala has just recently published some initial results of a research project he conducted in the Uinta Basin using custom-built devices called MUPAS for Modular Unidentified Phenomenon Alert System. And what they are, they're sensors that monitor a variety of environmental signals, including RF, gravimetric, gamma radiation, microwaves. And what Jim has found is, I think, bloody astounding. It's extraordinary work. It's really impressive. He put these sensors adjacent to the homes and other locations where subjects who were reporting anomalous phenomena kept journals in which they tracked their anomalous experiences. These included things like unusual physical symptoms and health effects, precognitive effects, UAP and orb sightings. And these people also reported encounters with various morphologies of NHI. Yep, aliens. And what Dr. Segala found was signals that strongly correlated with reported events. Not only that, the data was so consistent, he thinks he can even predict future events with almost 100% accuracy. For stats nerds, that's a 4.8% sigma, even down to whether they're going to be positive or negative experiences. So let's bring Jim in. Jim, welcome to Reality Check. Can you tell me, sir, firstly, who you are? Let's set up your credentials. Let's set you up as a real scientist, someone who's genuinely interested in anomalous phenomena.
Yeah, so I started out being an engineer, and engineers don't really deal with anomalies anymore. They always want to do everything is nuts and bolts. It's not until I switched over to being a physicist that I started to get into the realm of let's see if we can figure out what's going on with these strange phenomena that's been going on. And that's how it all started. I was fortunate enough after I got out of my PhDs to get a internship with Hal Puthoff at his institute in Austin, Texas, where he does, I would say, not cutting edge, not bleeding edge. He's way over the edge when he starts looking at things. So that's where I really cut my teeth in learning how to be a scientist, what to do, what's the right procedures and things like that.
So what have you been doing? You've been actually working at the Skinwalker Ranch, haven't you? You were involved in the ORSAP and BAS studies, essentially the DIA funded studies, the studies funded by the Defense Department.
Yeah, I was involved with Hal. His institution was actually part of that whole time frame when they were Bigelow was trying to understand, what's going on the ranch and doing all this interesting physics and science on the ranch. And Hal was, of course, a big part of that. He was a Bigelow science advisor, so he was actually part of that whole thing and led a lot of the science for that. So I got involved when I was working with him Later on, I actually was boots on the ground on Skinwalker Ranch doing investigations, looking at some of the injuries that are happening there and around in the general vicinity, unexplained injuries that were linked to seeing things or feeling things or having some experience with some kind of non-human intelligence that left injuries on people. That's how I got started in this field.
So let's quickly deal with the broad proposition, Jim, which I posited at the very beginning of the show. What do you say to the scientists, the people in mainstream science, who scoff at the notion that there is any scientific basis at all to anomalous phenomena?
Well, it's all the same thing. You in the scientific method, if you follow the scientific method and you do it properly, a lot of the problems that you would normally encounter in an investigation go away because now you're doing statistics right. You're setting up your experiments so you can actually pull out statistics in a proper way. So when you come to a situation like this, you say, well, we have anomalies that are happening. We're having medical anomalies happening in some part of the country. So we're going to say, okay, how do we prove that? So first of all, you have to have a hypothesis that says, why are they happening? And then you design experiments. So that's a lot of the things that we do is we put together experiments that allow us to really dive down and show to people that if you take all the data and you use verifiable type of equipment, you have proper scientific data.
We interviewed Brandon Fugel on this show a few weeks ago, and Brandon was quite annoyed at the idea that many people push, which is that Skinwalker Ranch, like a lot of TV reality shows, just makes stuff up. As I understand it, he's quite rigorous in ensuring and demanding that the producers of the TV show don't fake anything, and that the phenomena, including what's being revealed in this latest season's series, which is quite extraordinary, including, that any of the phenomena has to be based on solid science. As a scientist yourself, can you confirm that that's the case?
Well, when of course, I spent some time on the ranch and I did a lot of work at the ranch with other scientists from Hal's group. And I would ensure that a lot of what happens is verifiable to the point where you can do it. The problem comes in, how do you get it to happen on camera? It's very, very difficult to do. So a lot of what you're seeing might not be real time, but it is authentic in that it happened at some point and it was recreated somehow. So, and that was a problem. I spent a year there trying to do science on camera and, trying to get it, the anomalies to happen on camera is very, very difficult to do.
So you haven't just focused on Skinwalker. Your work's taken you all over the Uinta Basin, including to a place called the Blind Frog Ranch. What I'm fascinated by is that you've started using sensor systems to try to scientifically measure if when somebody is reporting experiences with anomalous phenomena, is there a detectable, statistically measurable piece of data that allows you to verify that something anomalous occurred? Tell me about MUPAS. What is it? How does it work? What are you measuring?
So it evolved, that whole system and the whole program that was invented to understand this all evolved from, we found out and we were very sure that we were having correlations between when people were seeing things or experiencing phenomena and then when there was actually phenomena recorded by either a camera or something like that. And then later on, within, say 12 to 24 hours, they were actually having symptoms that were just not normal for that type of geography that they were happened to be in. So we saw a lot of this, and it was we had over 40 cases where we had verifiable medical evidence that something happened to them. And then at the same time, we had some kind of evidence that they had seen something or felt something or some type of experience. And then you put all that together and you say to yourself, well, if something is actually happening physically to them during these experiences, it must have some vector, or it must have come from the outside into their body somehow. And if that happens, we could probably measure it at some point if we have the right equipment. So that was the inspiration to say, okay, let's put some equipment near the people that are having these experiences, seeing the UAPs or whatever that's happening, and then see if we can actually get them to correlate the two.
So what do your MUPAS sensors measure?
So they measure a couple things. A lot of it is the environmental signals, for instance, like all the radiation. Radiation, of course, is a very, very wide band. It goes from microwave all the way up to alpha and gamma, so it's slow. So we measure a pretty big spread of the electromagnetic spectrum, and we record it like every millisecond. We'll take a snapshot and bring it in and look at it. And then we do, the gamma particles, any alpha or betas or any kind of gamma particles that might be near the person at that time. We measure all sorts of crazy things like, we're measuring like the gravity vectors, the magnetic fields that they're surrounded in, anything that could be perturbated by some type of anomalous craft or some kind of energy that's in the property. So, it's kind of interesting. We started out as, maybe just doing, the standard stuff like the radiation and the gamma. And then we said, wait a minute, if those are getting affected, why isn't the other channels being affected? Like, for instance, the acceleration vectors and things. So we started adding more and more sensors. And now we're...
Can you stop me there? For instance, what? Sorry? Acceleration? What was that?
So the little acceleration. So let's just say that there's something that happens in the environment where a craft will fly by. It'll move the surroundings a little bit, and you can actually pick these up with very, very accurate or very sensitive acceleration vectors. You'll get these little bounces, especially in the magnetic fields. I mean, you look at the magnetic fields. If something comes by you, some energetic thing comes by you, it's very possible that the magnetic vector is going to get a little bit, your gravity vector is going to get hit a little bit. So all of these things could get put into a system, and then we can look at the correlation between all these signals.
Now, Jim, I've got to ask you now, I mean, when you're talking about a craft whizzing by, have you been anywhere where a craft or some kind of UAP has whizzed by and you've seen a change in a magnetic field or any other of these correlative sensor data sets?
So now, after we've done this it started in, say, 2018, we've done this for quite a bit of time now. And I think at this point, we have over 600 instances where we have something verified out in the environment that we've recorded either video or seen through, cell phones or something like that. And at the same time, recorded something with the equipment that allowed us to correlate those two together. And then on top of that, looking back at the people, having them report that within some period of time afterwards, they would have some type of change to their body that indicated that something energetic went by them.
So the way this works, you've got people who've previously experienced anomalous phenomena, including a lot of your test subjects, I understand, have been people who were working in the Uinta Basin, including at Skinwalker Ranch and Blind Frog Ranch. And they were reporting anomalous phenomena, and they were keeping a journal. And so they'd presumably wake up in the middle of the night and say, I just saw an orb in my bedroom, or, I mean, give me some examples of what they saw.
So it was a nice little system that was set up for them. So these devices just sit there and record, and they're just all in the background record. But you also gave them a nice little portal where they can actually log all of their anecdotal narratives of, like, I woke up and I had this incredible dream. The dogs were barking, and all of a sudden there was an orb that flew by. I went outside, I looked up, and there was something, and I took a picture of it. So we have all the narratives and all of this anecdotal information from these people for, over 3 years worth of data. We had well over 35 people that actually participated in this. And it's like gobs and gobs of data that we put through models, and we allowed us to do.
So let me cut to the quick. There's a case study in one of your PowerPoints that you very kindly sent me, and it's number 316. And in it, the patient is quoted as saying, immediately after you've picked up some data that actually corroborates this, they say, quote, I am telling you, last night was such a crazy night. If I were to ever say I was abducted, it would have been last night. It was the strangest experience. Can you tell me, I don't expect you to know this off by heart, but can you tell me, do you recall what you picked up in terms of correlative, measurable data at the exact point that that person described that experience?
Right. So the interesting part of the experiment that we did is that it's sort of a blind experiment. The people have no idea what the data looks like. They never really know. They know maybe 2-3 weeks later. but they just put these like things in it, and this one popped up one night, and I looked at it and I said, well, that's interesting. And when they pop up, they also show the system shows you what's going on in all the other sensors, and all of a sudden I had to see at the exact moment that that person said that, like you know, leading up to that point, there was this enormous electromagnetic spike and gamma spike simultaneously in two of the sensors. So it was like the person had this incredible dream or whatever happened to them. They had this feeling that there were, something was going on with them. And I looked at the recording of the sensors, and that popped out. There was this enormous amount of electromagnetic energy and gamma energy in the room.
Just to give the viewers the exact numbers, it was 22 times the normal levels of gamma radiation.
Yes, I forgot about that. Yeah,
10 times the normal levels of microwave radiation. Now,
yes.
Is there anything prosaic, anything normal, anything mundane that can explain how it came to be that at the very same time that that person was reporting anomalous phenomena or experience, you were detecting with your independent sensors, without the knowledge of that person, huge leaps in gamma radiation and microwave radiation?
So I can explain probably a very simple way that you can do electromagnetic energy. I mean, you can put it in a microwave and you can zap it. I mean, that's one way to do it. The gamma, though, that when the gamma spikes, you can't go to a Home Depot and do gammas and buy anything to do that. I mean, that's something that you'd have to go to a linear accelerator or something like that, or go to a oncology to have any kind of gamma of that level.
So, Jim, I'm doing you the favor of making the point here. You're a very cautious, measured, objective scientist. What I love about your research is, frankly, it's a poke in the eye for the people in mainstream science who contemptuously dismissed the idea that there isn't this kind of work being done. You are looking at controlled blind studies where test subjects are reporting anomalous phenomena, and you are receiving data independently without the knowledge of those people, verifying at exactly the same time that they are experiencing spikes in, well, isn't that alarmingly dangerous levels of radiation we're talking about? 22 times normal gamma?
Yeah, but it happens over short periods of time. So it's not like in other words, if you go into an oncology and you had radiation, therapy for some lesion, it's something that would be over minutes and hours. This is like very, very short, very high pulses. So, I don't make it fantastic or anything, but it's almost like it's been turned on, turned off really quickly. So, but it's enough for the instrumentation to measure it. And so, and people ask me all the time, should I leave my house? Should I just leave the state? They said, radon is in everybody's house, and I don't know, and everybody has it, and you can see the radon clicking across because there's a Geiger counter in these devices that are actually measuring all of the all of the gamma, alpha particles and beta particles. But it's when you have that little background energy and all of a sudden, bam, it takes off, and it correlates with when somebody says, I just had this incredible sensation that I'm being watched, or, I looked up in the sky and I saw something flying by. That's when you get some really good scientific data.
So you're saying that you've actually been able to, over the years that you've been doing this work, you've found correlations between your sensor system, your MUPAS sensors, and what people are reporting on 600 separate occasions.
That's correct. So I have thousands and thousands of occasions where people report something, or where the instrument reports something, but it's only when they actually line up to be within a very, very close margin are they considered to be correlated. You can have something that's a week old or something like that, but it's only when they're like within a very short period of time, within seconds, that that's an actual correlated event. So, and it's actually interesting, the stuff that happens that are not correlated, it doesn't mean that they're not actual anomalous events. It just means that the sensor might not have picked up that particular waveform, but the human does. The humans are amazing sensors. We have so many great sensors. We're just terrible at reporting them. We make stuff up in our heads. But the electronics, of course, is not so great at picking up everything because it's only time slicing and it's not doing it all the time. So it could be a lot of misses. So we have thousands of misses, and out of those thousands and thousands, we have, maybe 600 that were actually statistically good enough to put in the model.
Let's talk about the case 316. In the PowerPoint slide that you very kindly sent me before this interview, and you see a whole lot of different electromagnetic measurements with big spikes. Talk me through those spikes. I see there's different EM types, different types of electromagnetic radiation. There's gamma radiation, there's RF, there's also gravitometric. Talk me through where you're seeing these spikes, and are these all measuring anomalies at exactly the same time that this individual reported this phenomena?
You're right. So I don't really say that's a viable thing if I just have one channel. Let's just say that I get a spike in the gamma, but I get nothing in the other sensors. And I say, but that's probably something that is not going to be considered a viable. But if you all of a sudden get a spike in electromagnetic field and you lose like 4 or 5 satellites from your GPS tracker or your GPS system, or maybe you have your magnetic field kind of wiggles a little bit at the exact same moment, then you've got something that's viable. So you're right. So you need to have multiple channels actually getting hit at the same time to make it usable.
So, Jimmy, you've often been on location when this anomalous phenomena is being reported. What's the spookiest thing you've seen?
So, it's actually quite interesting that a lot of people claim, and there's millions and millions of claims of people seeing things and experiencing things. And you really can't appreciate it until your boots on the ground actually viewing this happening to people and interviewing them afterwards. Because you just sit with these people and you interview them and you try to get a histology of all the things that led up to that. And afterwards, what you can appreciate that these things are not made up in their head. If you can actually find medical marks on them afterwards and you can find visual evidence. So the big thing that happened to me, when I first started this, like I said in the beginning, engineers are trained by definition to ignore all the anomalies. They stay away from anomalies, but scientists and physicists run towards anomalies. So we like that. So that taught me that these people are not making this stuff up. This is actual real stuff because we're recording something changing in the environment just before they have these incidences.
Have you seen anything yourself?
I've seen one UFO. The problem is I'm not 100% sure it was a UFO. It could have been a satellite. It could have been, something high up in the air, but it was definitely something that I recorded. And actually, the interesting feeling you get when your body can't explain something is quite profound. I mean, if you see something in the air that just looks crazy and doesn't look like anything you've ever seen, your hair stands up. You get that fright flight type of feeling, and it's actually quite profound.
I noticed they use it in the opening credits of the current series of Skinwalker Ranch, but there's an incredible shot. Is it Dragon who suffered the inflammation in his brain and his skull cavity from some kind of electromagnetic radiation that he was exposed to? But you see kind of like a horrendous looking skull x-ray, and there's kind of like a bump in his brain cavity. What happened there? Is that something that was one of the things that was reported?
No, it was a thing that didn't actually, I don't know if that happened. It was a data point that we looked at. We weren't really sure if it would happen on the ranch or correlated with the ranch. Like I said, we had 45 patients in and around, we had medical reports from people all over the country. And this was a very, very typical type of injury that people would develop lesions after coming into contact with these anomalous events.
Tom Kelleher wrote a very interesting article in Edge Science a few years ago where he described anomalous phenomena damaging people, and in some cases, people having the weirdest paranormal experiences after being on Skinwalker Ranch. And it's what's called euphemistically, I think Jay Stratton's come up with this term, the hitchhiker effect.
Hitchhiker, yes.
And I'll respect the anonymity of certain people here and what I'm going to put to you here, but essentially, I understand you were on the team during the ORSAP BAS program studies funded by the US Defense Intelligence Agency, where multiple ranch visitors reported bringing home hitchhiker phenomenon. And when we're talking about hitchhikers, what we're talking about is, in some cases, absolutely terrifying paranormal phenomenon, dogmen, werewolf type creatures. So Robert Bigelow, George Knapp, Jim Costigan, and a senior naval intelligence officer whom we're calling John Axelrod, they all reported the hitchhiker phenomenon, but it's Axelrod who reported perhaps the most interesting one, and that's nightmarish dogmen appearing in their backyard, blue, red, yellow, and white orbs routinely floating through their home and yard, and this is the spookiest part, black shadow people standing over the end of their beds and loud, unexplained footsteps walking up and down their stairs. Is that the kind of phenomenon that your victims, your patients, your witnesses have experienced?
Absolutely. It's kind of, and the way you say it is actually quite interesting. And when you ask these people, they're very, very reluctant to tell you. A lot of the things, the people that we were in our study were Native Americans, and they are the most profound. They had the most sensitivity to this, so they produced amazing data. I don't know what your experience has been, but this is incredible. Anyway, so when they actually get to the point where they will give you their narratives of what happened, and that's exactly the language they use. And when you put equipment next to them and they actually have this happen simultaneously with changes in the environmental signals that are being recorded into some kind of a device like we have, then they're not making it up. This is something that actually happens, that they have the ability to bring into their heads and actually manifest themselves somehow. I'm not saying that there were these creatures out there. We can't say that in a scientific way. All we're saying is that whatever induced this in their heads came from outside their heads. It wasn't something they completely manufactured within.
It's funny, I've spoken to one of the individuals who saw what they've described as a werewolf dogman-like creature. And I said to them, was it real? And they looked at me with incredulity and said, of course it was real. They were, obviously, I know you've got to restrain yourself as a scientist, but there was no doubt in their mind that what they were looking at was something real, something solid, something physical that was manifesting itself, God forbid, in their home.
It's quite interesting. So we have, megabytes worth of data, narratives that people write, and they get very prolific when they write about their sensations and things like that. They talk about lots of things anyway. So it's actually quite interesting when you hear it, the emotion that they put into this stuff. So they believe it's 100% real. Whether it's real or not, that's something that we don't know yet, but we know there's something physical happened in the environment just before they saw these things.
So can anyone get one of these MUPAS units, Jim? Like, how much are they?
Yeah.
I must confess, there are people here in Australia, I'd love to buy one.
So the story goes is that when I originally started this in Hal's group, this was all started within Hal's Institute for Advanced Studies out of Austin. And it was funded by this European philanthropist who was very, very wealthy and very, very generous. And he funded most of the hardware and the upkeep and all this other stuff. And I shut it down about a year ago. I said, I have enough data. I'm going to publish it. I'm going to write a book and all that stuff. When people found out I did that, they got all mad at me, and they demanded that I get back into the thing. I said, okay, so I made a website and I put all the data on there, and I made it available for them to go. I said, you want one? I don't have the funding anymore to pay for these things through our sponsor, Hal's sponsor. But if you want one, I'll put it on there and I'll put it on the network, and you can do the same. But yet they have to guarantee me that they're going to give me the narratives. They're going to actually, be involved in the study and, give me all that information. So all of a sudden, all these people came out of the woodwork asking me to, I made it available. I do it. It's pure nonprofit. So I don't make any money on it. I just, when I tell everybody how much all the parts are, and I put, we have people to put them together, but I made it available.
Are MUPAS units something that people can buy?
Yeah. There, right now, I have it on the internet. It's something I'm completely foreign to. I've never done this before. But we make them and ship them out, and I've got people ordering all over the place. So it turns out there's a big community of people that have they have the want to answer the questions themselves because they are scared to death of what's going on in their heads. They're seeing things. They're walking outside at night and they're seeing these things in their neighborhoods, and and they don't understand why it's happening, and they just want a little relief.
This is the thing, Jim, that I know there are so many people contacting me, and there are days when I just get completely overwhelmed because there's a lot of very good people who are hurting all over the world, people who are suffering what they describe as abduction experiences where they're having an engagement with the phenomenon. And the thing that infuriates them is when I have to say to them, well, what evidence have you got that this happened? How can you prove that there was something anomalous that took place? What I'm very excited about with the technology that you're describing is you've got a demonstrated ability now to show correlations between anomalous phenomena and measurable data.
Yeah, and I want to remind you that it didn't start out like that. It started out where we were trying to understand the correlation between physical events that are happening in the environment and these experiences they're having. What came out of that is the actual ability to look at it, look at the waveforms leading up to some point and to predict whether or not how they're doing, as far as it's almost like one of those mood rings, but for this kind of paranormal activity that they were experiencing, to say it looks like you might be having an event within the next week or so to give them some kind of relief. And that's kind of the crux of what they wanted to understand.
Now, what interested me, I'm fascinated by the sequence of events here because obviously you started seeing stuff during the ORSAP and BAASS, the BASS studies that were done for the Defence Intelligence Agency. Colm Kelleher was involved in doing similar work with Robert Bigelow during the earlier NIDS studies. And you've also got work now being done by Travis Taylor and all of his colleagues at Skinwalker Ranch, which are also detecting measurable anomalous phenomena.
Right.
What I want to drill down into here, because I think this is a really important issue, is what's euphemistically called, and I think sometimes inaccurately called, Havana syndrome. One of the things that comes out of your work is the capacity to measure people who are experiencing anomalous phenomena, not just in the Uinta Basin, but anywhere in the world. And as we all know, in 2017 or in 2016, there were over 30 US and Canadian diplomats at embassies in Cuba who were reporting unexplained health problems. And the initial cause was suspected to be a sonic weapon. Then it happened in Guangzhou in China, similar symptoms in 2017. And in 2018, you started researching injuries of unknown origin in Utah's Uinta Basin. And these were stumping investigating physicians. They couldn't find correlations. And in the end, a detailed scientific histology of the patients and medical records pointed to an electromagnetic energy pulse as the cause. And this is how in 2018 you began to construct devices to record these environmental signals. So is it accurate that your work was a response to the growing concern about US diplomats and other civilians being caught up in what's called now Havana syndrome?
Actually, yeah, to give the timeline a little bit more accuracy. So they had their incidences, the 50 people that were down in Havana that came back, and they were separated into, I think, 8 different hospitals throughout the United States. Walter Reed, those kind of hospitals. At the same time, Dr. Kit Green, I don't know if you've heard of Dr. Kit Green. He was a person that also works with Hal. He was on the team that I worked with. He was the medical side, I was the physics side. We started looking at some of these injuries that we were seeing in our case studies, and we were saying almost with high degree of confidence that it was some type of electromagnetic pulse that was actually causing the injuries and doing this. The National Academy of Science came out with a statement that we said, we feel that it's the electromagnetic pulse that is actually causing this. We didn't really know. The people that were doing Havana syndrome said there was sonic. And they said, well, our patients look more like it's going to be electromagnetic. And then the Academy of Science, National Academy of Science, did a very detailed study, which lasted, I think, 2 years. I think 2019, 2020, they came out with a statement that says, okay, we think it's electromagnetic pulse as well. So that kind of made us feel, whoa, we thought we were crazy for thinking this. And all of a sudden they came out with it. It was like a big, anyway, made us feel great.
Okay, so I'm interested because a lot of what I'm sourcing here is from an article that Colm Kelleher wrote in Edge Science. And it's interesting to me because I know there's Colm Kelleher, there's Kit Green, and there's also Gary Nolan. And I think you've actually been working at times with Gary. And all of you have been looking at these correlations with injuries that might be related in some way to electromagnetic or some kind of weaponry system. What interests me is there was an article in JAMA, I think it's one of the main scientific journals in America, which revealed many of the Cuba patients, the Cuba Havana syndrome patients, had something called diffuse axonal injuries. There was no physical head trauma, but it turned out that your research in the Uinta Basin also showed that patients you were looking at also had diffuse axonal injuries. What is a diffuse axonal injury and why is this significant data?
Well, okay, so basically, like a boxer gets hit in the head, and you get some trauma to the head. If you have these little axons that go between your neurons, if you hit them hard enough, they split. So, like if you have a car accident or you have some kind of a large head trauma, you get these tears and you get these little micro bleeds in your head. That happens a lot when you have trauma to the head. I mean, significant trauma to the head. They were seeing this without any trauma whatsoever, which was very disturbing. So you have a normal person doing their normal thing, they're laying in bed or whatever, and all of a sudden they get hit by something and they have an MRI done of them, a very specific MRI, and they find out they have these microbleeds, which are an indication that you have this ailment. And they don't understand what's going on. So what's going on? How can that possibly happen without actual head trauma? So that was something that was a big question mark for them.
Now, one of the things that really blew me away, Jim, was in your research, you actually concluded, quote, treating the land and phenomenon with respect usually leads to a very positive interaction with lower level recordings on the scientific instruments. Negative interactions show very defined peaks with profound negative effects. Now, let's just apply this to Skinwalker Ranch. I know one of the things that they say at Skinwalker Ranch is you're not meant to dig, you're not meant to cut into the landscape there, and that there's been injuries reported on security staff and other personnel at Skinwalker Ranch, and also on people all around the Uinta Basin, when there's actually been physical intrusion into the landscape, cutting, digging. Can you verify that? And what do you think is going on?
Like I said, a lot of the people that we've had in this study were the Native Americans that basically have a very high regard for the land. And they always warn you that you shouldn't do this, shouldn't do this. So a lot of this is from the lore from them. But statistically, the evidence that we've collected show that when people report back what they did that day and how they would go up into the mountains of the Uinta Basin, and they would, maybe bring something back, or they would do something. And if there was something that was destructive in sense, they would come back and the equipment would start doing very crazy things, and they would report that, we're not, my kids are screaming, the dogs are barking, something is going on. So they report all these things, very, very negative connotations to what they were saying. But when they did something positive, when they actually did something and they went up there and they were very, gentle to the land, it seemed that they always had a positive type of thing. So, and if it was just one or two or three instances, that's great. But this was hundreds of instances that you can actually correlate this.
And you've got to the point now where you believe that you can detect with a level of predictive accuracy that you're going to get these correlations. Can you explain that to me?
Well, if you think about it, if you have a waveform that you record for hours and hours and hours, and you have points there that people report that they have instances or some experience that happens. So then you look back in the history of these things, and you can say, well, every time this person reports that they have these experiences, this is the type of waveform that would lead up to it. And so then you say, okay, well, I'm going to start looking for that waveform in the future. And when it starts to escalate and kind of, become more and more profound as it goes along, that's an indication that they might have some kind of incident, coming up very soon. And again, it doesn't really matter what it could be positive, it could be negative. It really depends on what the waveforms are kind of telling you. And it's not just the waveforms of the equipment, it's what people report as their weeks go by.
There's another saying in science, which is correlation is not causation. So you've got a correlation here to show that, you're seeing spikes in electromagnetic radiation at the same time as people are reporting anomalous phenomena. You can't say definitively, can you, that one is causing the other?
No, you can't. And unfortunately, you can't. So what you try to do is you try to gather enough statistics and switch it in the way that you say, that, like I said, today's models, AI is very, very helpful in this. You use large language models, you do all this kind of crazy stuff. It's very, very available and easy to use now. And you let that do your science for you, basically. You just provided enough data that allows you to pull out the predictions to say, okay, well, this is happening. And then you can go back through 3 years of data and check to see how you're doing. If you go back a year, this person had a profound experience at this date, what did it look like beforehand? And you can get you get your error bars to see, how that looked.
One of the things I'm really interested in is the work that Professor Gary Nolan's done at Stanford University, where he's looking at the likelihood that people who have this engagement with the phenomenon, who appear to attract the phenomenon, have an enlarged basal ganglia at the foot of the caudate putamen. Please correct me if I've made any mistakes in my pronunciation.
No, that was perfect. That was perfect.
But are you seeing anything like that? Is there a detectable brain shape for people who are experiencing this phenomenon? Have you been doing scans of the brains of people?
I personally have not, but I work with Dr. Green, who is actually involved in that type of work. He's looking at that kind of correlation. What the correlation that I find is that there's, like, for instance, there might be people that would have these experiences, see something in the air, have these medical problems or something like that, have somebody stand next to them who actually see that, but have actually no medical issues whatsoever. So two people side by side see the exact same phenomena. One actually see the phenomena, but not have it like a profound experience. One person has the experience, other person doesn't. So it's obvious that some people are better at this than other people are. So there's no question about that.
So, Jim, okay, we're coming to the end of our interview here, and this is where I ask you the really curly question that puts you on the spot. And the curly question obviously is, you're a scientist, you're objective, you're measured, you're careful. But you've got 600 incidents where you've seen observable correlations between spikes in RF and other types of data, mainly EM data, and reported anomalous phenomenon by multiple witnesses. Is it real?
So I can guarantee you one thing. It's real to the person that actually reported it. They actually feel they saw something in the air, or they saw something floating through the room. They saw something. Whether or not it's a physical entity that has matter, unknown.
So when John Axelrod, as he's called, and his poor family, who were literally on the other side of America from Skinwalker Ranch, where Axelrod had been based, whatever he brought home Do you think that phenomenon was real? The dogmen, the floating hooded creatures hovering over the end of the bed, the footsteps on the stairs? I mean, whatever it is, they're seeing something, aren't they?
They're seeing something. There's no question about it. I mean, your brain is very sophisticated. It can manufacture things, but what is causing your brain to manufacture those is the thing that I'm more interested in. The signals that are happening. But you have to realize a lot of these people that have the Venus that had the skin, or no, sorry, the hitchhiker, they got medically sick with things that were completely out of character for, or out of the DNA, or out of for that particular family. I mean, blood diseases that would are just unheard of.
Yeah, in fact, we're talking here about Graves' disease, Raynaud's syndrome,
Yes,
autoimmune
yes,
diseases such as lupus, flu-like symptoms. So you're
yes.
literally seeing observable diseases of the body that appear to be correlated to anomalous phenomena.
Yep. And to the point where some of the government agencies, NCIS, FBI, have come to us asking for our data because we've instrumented people that are in that realm of people that can use the NCIS, the Navy cops. So we provided them with data of incidences, case studies that we've done, which have correlations between what's happening in the environment, what they saw, and also medical evidence that we've collected for those particular people.
You know, I find it hilarious. You've got the CIA and other agencies coming to you as an independent scientist, asking you for your data on observed UAP, anomalous paranormal phenomena. Clearly, there is research being done inside the US government into this anomalous phenomena. And yet at the same time, we have the Pentagon's UAP office denying there's any issue at all. I mean, what do you make of that?
Well, it all comes down to people that are out in the world doing their lives. They're getting hurt, and the government, the FBI, all these agencies are there to protect them. So they have to act. They have to do something. But the Pentagon, maybe they're saying, let's look at the bigger picture. More threats. I've been involved in briefings in the Pentagon and the Senate building where we actually sat in front of these people, these intelligence people, and gave them our thoughts and our research, and they never looked surprised, but they always looked receptive to the point where they might be getting information from us that they've never heard before, but you can always tell that they have information already that they know about. That, of course, they never tell you anything.
They know a lot more than they're letting on, Jim. That's the fascinating thing. The big question in my
Yeah.
mind is why are they concealing it?
That's going to probably come out at some point, maybe 50 years from now, who knows, but it'll be like, oh, I get it now.
Well, I hope it doesn't take that long. And Jim, quite frankly, I think that the kind of science that you're doing, where you're looking at these correlations between reported experiences and observable data, that's the beginning of attempts to measure the phenomenon. I mean, what you're actually doing is measuring alleged paranormal phenomena. Do you agree?
Yeah, the onset of it. Yes, absolutely.
And you're getting results.
Yeah, it's statistical results yet. I mean, nobody says it's not that the kind of thing that you can go and, say it's like foolproof. It's still statistics. It's still right sometimes, wrong sometimes, but we're getting better and better as more and more people give their data and participate.
Well, Dr. Jim Segala, I, for one, want to thank you as a scientist for taking this subject seriously. And I know there are a lot of people out there who are so frustrated and upset that mainstream science spurns their desire for whatever it is they're experiencing to be taken seriously. So thank you for using
You're
good
very welcome.
science to engage with a phenomenon that is the most baffling and complex of all. And thank you for speaking to Reality Check.
You're very welcome. Nice having me.
Thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And please don't forget to click that red subscribe button to ensure you get more of NewsNation's unbiased and fact-driven news coverage.